Hi everyone. In today's lesson, we're going to talk more about trig derivatives. So the trick to remember sine and cosine derivatives we've been talking about all along is sine, cos, negative sine, negative cos. And we move this from left to right to find the derivatives. So now what I'd like to do is prove the derivative of tangent, secant, cosecant, and cotangent. So we first need to rewrite, at least let's start with tangent. We first need to rewrite tangent as sine over cosine. Now we can use the quotient rule to find the derivative, where sine is my high and cos is my low. So my f prime will be low times d high. The derivative of sine is simply cos, so we look over here to the right. So low d high minus high, and now d low. The derivative of cosine is negative sine. All over low squared. So cosine of x squared. So f prime of x equals cosine times cosine is cosine squared. And sine times negative sine, or negative times negative, is a positive sine squared. And we can divide that by, again, cosine squared of x. Remember, we can write it the squared on the outside or the squared on the inside. So cosine squared plus sine squared. This is actually a Pythagorean identity. So you have to remember that cosine squared plus sine squared is actually 1. So this is really 1 over cosine squared. And we know that 1 over cosine is, in fact, secant. And since it's squared, we could say secant squared of x. So this is the derivative of secant squared. Oh, excuse me, the derivative of tangent is secant squared of x. So I'm not going to go through the other 4 trig derivatives. I'd actually like you guys to try them on your own. I'll give you a hint and get you started. Secant, we know, is 1 over cosine. So use the quotient rule with that to try to see if you can prove that derivative. Cotangent, we know, is the same thing as cosine over sine. So f of x is cosine over sine. So this time use the cosine as your high and the sine as your low. And secant, cosecant of x is 1 over sine of x. So again, use the 1 as your high and the sine as your low. See if you can find those next trig functions, and then let's move on to the next page. Okay, so the derivatives that you should have proved are here. So we did tangent squared with secant squared. Cosecant, the derivative of that is negative cosecant u, cotangent. Derivative of secant is secant tan, and the derivative of cotangent is negative cosecant squared. We can go over those proofs tomorrow just to make sure that we understand them, but I'd like to get into the examples. So example number 1 says, find the derivative if f of x is 5 cosecant of 2x plus 3. So we're going to look up here at cosecant. So my derivative of cosecant is simply negative cosecant u, cotangent u, then times the derivative of the inside. That's what du over dx means. So our f prime is, so because there's a 5 in front, we're just going to follow that with it. So it's technically a negative because of that negative 5. So negative 5 cosecant of 2x plus 3 times cotangent of 2x plus 3. But then we have to take the derivative of the inside and multiply it. So the derivative of 2x plus 3 is just 2. So if you wanted to simplify this, you could multiply these two together. So you would get f prime of x is equal to negative 10 cosecant of 2x plus 3 cotangent of 2x plus 3. And that would be your final derivative. All right, let's look at the next one, example number 2. I want to find the derivative of 1/4, negative 1/4 secant of 5x. So now we're here. The derivative of secant of u is secant tan times du over dx, which means the derivative of the inside. So since I have the derivative of negative 1/4, and this is a positive, all we're going to do is just negate the answer. So my f prime of x is negative 1/4 secant of 5x times tangent of 5x times the derivative of the inside. And the derivative of 5x is just 5. So times 5. Again, you can multiply the coefficients. So f prime of x is negative 5/4 secant of 5x tangent of 5x. So again, since the derivative of secant is a positive secant tangent, I needed the derivative of negative secant, so I just negated the answer instead. All right, let's take a look at the next example. So number 3 says find the derivative of tangent to the third of 7x plus 1. So first things first, we need to remember from yesterday that we need to rewrite this as tangent of 7x plus 1, this whole thing to the third. So when we take our derivative, we have to remember that this is a chain rule. We're going to take my 3, drop it in front. So 3 times tangent of 7x plus 1, that whole thing squared. And the chain rule says that we must take the derivative of the inside. So the derivative of tangent, we know, is secant squared. And all we have to do for that is really just look up here and find the derivative. So if you look, the derivative of tangent of u is secant squared times du over dx, which means the derivative of the inside. So secant squared of 7x plus 1 times the derivative of this inside, which is 7. So if you wanted to clean this up a little bit, you can multiply the 3 and the 7. That gives me 21. So 21 tangent squared of 7x plus 1 times secant squared of 7x plus 1. So it's okay that I brought the squared back in here because that's what it means when I square the whole thing. Okay, last but not least is number 4. So we want to first rewrite this because I have another cotangent squared. So we're going to say f of x is cotangent of 4x, this whole thing squared. So again, we have to recognize that this is a chain rule. So we're going to bring the 2, drop it in front. So we've got f prime of x is 4 times cotangent of 4x, drop the power down by 1, and now we have to take the derivative of the inside. So if we look up here, the derivative of cotangent, the last one that we haven't done, is here. So the derivative, the derivative of cotangent is negative cosecant squared times the derivative of the inside. So negative cosecant squared of 4x times the derivative of the inside, which is 4. So if we want to simplify this, we can multiply the 4 and the 4. So f prime of x gives me 16 cotangent of 4x, no power necessary because the power is 1, then times cosecant squared of 4x. Now I forgot about this negative, so 4 times 4 times negative would make this a negative 16. So that can go all the way in the front as well. So that would be my final answer. All right, so for homework, please work through the proofs on the first page. I think we did the first one together, so please finish the rest, and that's where we'll start class tomorrow. All right, have a good night.